3 weeks had passed since the Emergency Council meeting. The war between the Zephyrian Empire and the Altarian Federation now burned across 47 star systems. Refugee ships crowded every neutral station. Military fleets clashed in battles that lit up entire sectors of space. President Vexatar stood before the largest crowd of reporters she had ever seen. Representatives from over 200 different species filled the main assembly hall. Their cameras, sensors, and recording devices pointed at her like weapons. She could feel their hunger for news about the spreading war. Her hands shook as she gripped the speaking platform. In all her years as president, she had never made a speech this important. The wrong words could doom the galaxy to something far worse than war. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice carried to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "The Council calls for immediate peace talks between the warring factions. But first, we must address a critical safety issue that affects every spacefaring civilization." She paused, trying to control her fear. Behind her, the Great Seal of the Galactic Council displayed the symbols of unity and peace. Today, those symbols felt like lies. All military and civilian vessels are now prohibited from entering the Sol system, she announced. This includes any approach to the third planet of that system, locally known as Earth. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. While most species knew about the general restrictions around human space, this public declaration was unprecedented. "Thus, humans must not learn about our current war," Vextar continued. "Their involvement in galactic conflicts has historically resulted in outcomes that exceed all reasonable measures of destruction and consequence." She activated the wall screens, showing peaceful images of Earth. Blue oceans sparkled under white. Clouds. Green continents showed no signs of advanced military installations. To most observers, it looked like a quiet farming world. "Do not let this peaceful appearance fool you," the president warned. "The species on this planet possesses military capabilities that defy our understanding of warfare, strategy, and acceptable methods of conflict resolution." A reporter from the Outer Rim raised a mechanical arm. "President Vextar, surely you exaggerate. How dangerous could one primitive species be?" Vextar's expression grew dark. "Primitive? Let me tell you about their idea of primitive warfare." She changed the display to show star charts marking the former Drakmor territories. Where once two mighty empires had controlled hundreds of worlds, now only green agricultural planets remained. 15 years ago, the Drakmor conflict had raged for 3 years. Two galactic superpowers had fought each other to near extinction. Billions had died. Both sides possessed weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the importance of the story. "A single human vessel offered to mediate," Vexatar continued. "One ship, 30 crew members. They called themselves peacekeepers." She paused, remembering the reports that had terrified the Council all those years ago. The human solution was elegant in its simplicity. They introduced self-replicating technological parasites into every electronic system in both empires. These microscopic machines could evolve, adapt, and spread through any advanced technology. The reporters began to look uncomfortable. Several species had heard rumors about Drakmor, but few knew the complete story. "The parasites didn't just disable military equipment," Vextar explained. "They consumed everything. Power grids failed. Life support systems shut down. Communication networks collapsed. Transportation stopped working. Food distribution systems died." A water-breathing reporter from Aquatica Prime made bubbling sounds of distress. "How many died from the system? Failures?" "That's the truly terrifying part," Vexatar replied. "Almost no one died. The humans had calculated exactly how to cripple both civilizations without causing mass casualties. They reduced 2 galactic empires to pre-industrial technology levels in 6 hours, but kept the population alive." "6 hours?" gasped a crystalline being from the Silicon worlds. 6 hours, Vextar confirmed. Then Captain Bill Walker, the human commander, contacted both Empire leaders. He told them the parasites would remain active until they signed a permanent peace treaty. The assembly hall fell completely silent. The only sounds came from recording equipment and nervous breathing from various species. Both empires signed the treaty immediately. Vextar continued. They had no choice. Without technology, they couldn't fight. They couldn't even communicate between planets. She changed the display again, showing current images of the former Drakmor worlds. Peaceful farming communities dotted green landscapes. People worked fields with hand tools and traveled by walking or riding animals. 15 years later, both civilizations remain at this technological level, she said. The parasites continue to evolve and destroy any attempt to rebuild advanced technology. They farm by hand, craft simple tools, and live in small communities. A young reporter from the Spiral Arm colonies stood up. But surely this was an extreme case. The humans wouldn't use such methods in every conflict. Vextar's laugh was bitter. The humans called it pest control. Captain Walker seemed genuinely puzzled when council representatives called his methods harsh. He asked if we would have preferred him to solve the problem by destroying both civilizations completely. The crowd shifted uneasily. The idea of humans having even more destructive options was terrifying. The human crew seemed proud of their restraint, Vextar added. They kept pointing out how few people had died. They appeared to view the technological destruction as a mild inconvenience rather than the end of 2 galactic civilizations. She gestured to the display, which now showed detailed maps of space routes, carefully avoiding the Sol system. Every major shipping lane curved around human space like water avoiding a hot stone. This is why we fear human involvement in any conflict, the president declared. They don't think like other species. They view war as a problem requiring creative solutions. Their solutions tend to be permanent, complete, and impossible to reverse. What makes them so different? Called out a reporter from the core worlds. They approach warfare like engineering, Vextar replied. Other species fight to win battles or capture territory. Humans fight to permanently eliminate the possibility of future conflict. They don't just want victory. They want to ensure the problem never happens again. She walked closer to the crowd, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. And they're very, very good at permanent solutions. The president returned to the platform and faced the cameras broadcasting to billions of beings across the galaxy. So I repeat this warning to every captain, every admiral, every government leader watching this broadcast. Stay away from Earth. Keep your conflicts far from human space. Their capacity for creative problem-solving remains unmatched in known space. What if they discover the war anyway? Asked a brave reporter. Vextar's scales turned pale. Then we pray they remain too busy with their own affairs to offer their help. Because when humans help end wars, the civilizations involved tend to stop being civilizations. As the press conference ended, reporters rushed to file their stories. Across the galaxy, fleet commanders checked their navigation systems twice. Diplomatic messages flew between governments with the same urgent warning: avoid human space at all costs. In the docking bay of the Council Station, a small human cargo vessel finished its approach sequence. Jake Morrison, Earth's junior trade representative, gathered his sample cases and prepared for another routine business meeting. He whistled softly as he walked toward the airlock, completely unaware that his arrival was about to trigger the largest diplomatic panic in galactic history. The bright lights in the council building hurt Ambassador Krillax's eyes. He had been sleeping when the emergency call came through his communication device. Now he sat in the big meeting room with hundreds of other aliens from across the galaxy. Everyone looked worried and scared. Krillax tapped his 4 claws on the smooth metal table. The sound made tiny clicks that echoed in the quiet room. On the wall screens, he could see red dots spreading across star maps. Each red dot meant another battle between the Zephyrian Empire and the Altarian Federation. The war had started 3 weeks ago with a trade dispute. Now it was burning through space like wildfire. Both sides kept sending more ships and bigger guns. Neither side wanted to back down. Council President Vextar walked to the front of the room. Her blue scales looked darker than usual, and her tail moved in short, nervous jerks. She had been president for 20 years, but Krillax had never seen her look so afraid. "Friends and colleagues," Vextar said in her deep voice, "we face a crisis. The war between the Zephyrians and Altarians has spread to 17 star systems. Trade routes are closed. Refugee ships fill our stations. Both armies are calling for allies." Ambassador Thrain from the Rigel worlds raised one of his 6 arms. "President Vextar, we must act. The fighting will spread to neutral systems soon. Our people are already suffering." Vextar nodded slowly. "Yes, we must act, but we must be very careful about how we act." She pressed a button, and the wall screens changed. Now they showed peaceful space around a small yellow star. The third planet from that star glowed blue and green and white. It looked beautiful and harmless. Every alien in the room became very quiet. Some moved away from the screens. Others made soft sounds of fear. The water-breathing delegate from Neftim actually hid inside his special suit. "The Sol system remains off-limits," Vextar said firmly. "No ships, no messages, no contact of any kind. The humans must not know about this war." Ambassador Krillax felt his stomach turn cold. He had been young during the last time humans got involved in a galactic war. He still had nightmares about what happened next. "Are we certain they don't know?" asked Ambassador Thrain. His voice shook a little. "Our spy networks report that Earth remains focused on internal matters," replied Krillax. "Their space monitoring only reaches their local area. As long as we keep the fighting far from their system, they should stay unaware." Vextar's relief was clear on her face. "Good. We must keep it that way." A young ambassador from the Crystal Colonies stood up. Her name was Zephyk, and she had only been in the council for 2 years. "President Vextar, I don't understand the fear. Humans are just one species on one planet. How dangerous could they be?" The room became dead silent. Several older ambassadors looked at Zephyk with horror. Ambassador Krillax felt sorry for the young diplomat. She had not lived through the terror of Drakmor. "Ambassador Zephyk," Vextar said slowly, "how much do you know about human military tactics?" "Very little," Zephyk admitted. "Earth's military technology appears primitive compared to most galactic powers. They barely have ships that can travel between stars." "That," said Ambassador Thrain, "is exactly what makes them so dangerous." Vextar activated another screen. This one showed old battle footage from 15 years ago. Massive warships burned in space while smaller ships tried to escape. The destruction covered 3 entire solar systems. "This was the Drakmor War," Vextar explained. 2 major powers fought for 3 years. Billions died. Both sides had weapons that could crack planets. The fighting grew worse each day. Zephyk watched the terrible scenes with wide eyes. "What ended it?" 30 humans in one small ship, Krillax said quietly. "They called their ship the Hampton. Captain Bill Walker commanded it. They said they came to help." "How could 30 humans stop such a massive war?" Zephyk asked. Ambassador Thrain laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "They didn't stop the war. They ended both civilizations." Vextar changed the screen again. Now it showed peaceful planets with green fields and small towns. People worked with simple tools like farmers from ancient times. The humans introduced something they called adaptive parasites into every computer system in both empires, Vextar explained. These tiny machines ate all technology more advanced than basic metal tools. Power plants stopped working. Spaceships fell from the sky. Communication networks died. "But surely the effects were temporary," Zephyk said hopefully. 15 years. "Later the parasites are still active," Krillax replied. They evolve and spread to any new technology. Both civilizations remain stuck in a pre-industrial age. They farm with hand tools and travel by walking. The humans called it pest control, Vextar added. Captain Walker seemed confused when we called his methods extreme. He asked if we would have preferred him to just blow everything up instead. Zephyk sat down heavily. They destroyed 2 galactic empires and called it pest control? And they seemed proud of how little damage they caused, Ambassador Thrain said. They kept pointing out that very few people actually died. They just lost the ability to fight wars with advanced weapons. Or do anything else requiring technology, Krillax added grimly. Vextar turned off the screens and faced the assembly. This is why we fear human involvement. They don't think like us. They don't fight like us. When they solve problems, they solve them permanently and completely. But they seem to want peace, Zephyk said weakly. They achieved peace, Vextar replied. Perfect, absolute peace. The kind of peace that comes when entire civilizations are too busy growing food by hand to build weapons. The president walked closer to the assembled delegates. So when this current war began, our first priority was keeping it secret from Earth. Humans view war as a problem to be solved. We cannot predict what solution they might create this time. Ambassador Krillax raised a claw. What about containment? Can we limit the war to specific regions? We're already trying, Vextar replied. Both the Zephyrians and Altarians have been informed about the human situation. Neither side wants to attract their attention. What if the fighting spreads despite our efforts? Asked Ambassador Thrain. Then we pray to whatever gods we worship that the humans remain focused on their own world, Vextar said. Because the alternative is having them focus on ours. As the meeting continued, none of the aliens noticed the small cargo ship that had just docked at the station's loading bay. The ship carried routine trade goods and one human diplomat named Jake Morrison, who was looking forward to a simple business meeting with his alien partners. Jake Morrison walked through the busy corridors of the council station with his usual cheerful confidence. The brown-haired diplomat carried a simple briefcase containing Earth's latest trade proposals. After 3 years of regular visits, he knew the station layout well and enjoyed watching the incredible variety of alien species conducting business. Today felt different, though. Conversations stopped when aliens noticed him approaching. A group of tall, bug-like beings actually turned around and hurried away when they saw him coming. Even stranger, the normally quick security checkpoint now required multiple scans and urgent consultations between the guards. Jake found this odd but not particularly concerning. Alien cultures often had customs that seemed strange to humans. He assumed some kind of religious holiday or cultural event was affecting normal procedures. "Good morning," he said cheerfully to the Vorthan security chief, a reptilian being named Grextal, who had processed Jake's visits many times before. "Beautiful day for trade negotiations, isn't it?" Grextal's scales immediately shifted from their normal green color to a pale yellow that Jake had learned indicated extreme stress or fear. The alien's clawed hands trembled as he held Jake's identification documents. "Representative Morrison," Grextal said very carefully, as if each word might explode. "Your presence here today is unexpected." Jake frowned slightly. "Unexpected? I filed all the standard diplomatic paperwork 3 weeks ago. This is just my regular quarterly trade review, same as always." Behind the security checkpoint, Jake could see other station personnel speaking rapidly into communication devices. Several were pointing in his direction while what looked like organized panic spread through their ranks. Security guards appeared from side corridors, though they kept their distance. "Perhaps," Grextal suggested with obvious desperation, "you might consider postponing this visit, maybe returning to your homeworld until certain situations resolve themselves." Jake's diplomatic training kicked in. Something was clearly wrong, but he needed more information before he could respond appropriately. "What situations?" he asked politely. I haven't received any alerts about problems affecting Earth's trade relationships. Grextal's scales turned almost white. You haven't heard about the war? What war? Jake asked, genuinely confused. The security chief looked like he might faint. Behind him, several guards were speaking urgently into their communicators. Jake caught fragments of alien languages, but heard his name mentioned repeatedly. Before Grextal could respond, the corridor filled with an impressive security escort. Council President Vextar herself appeared, flanked by a dozen guards and advisors. Jake had met the president during his first diplomatic visit, but she had never personally greeted him before. Representative Morrison, President Vextar said, with a smile that looked forced and terrified at the same time. What a wonderful surprise to see you here today. I trust your journey from Earth was peaceful and uneventful? Perfectly normal, thank you, Jake replied, now thoroughly puzzled by the presidential attention. Though I have to say, everyone seems unusually nervous today. The security chief mentioned something about a war. President Vexitar's eyes widened in what Jake was beginning to recognize as barely controlled panic. Several of her advisors made small sounds of distress. Oh, just a minor local conflict, the president said with false casualness. Nothing that would interest Earth, I'm certain. Very small scale. Hardly worth mentioning. Perhaps we could discuss your trade proposals in my private chambers? As they walked through the station corridors, Jake noticed something remarkable happening. The normally crowded pathways seemed to be clearing ahead of them. Aliens emerged from side passages, saw Jake, and immediately retreated. Shop owners closed their doors. Even maintenance workers disappeared into service tunnels. Is there some kind of evacuation drill happening? Jake asked, looking around at the emptying corridors. Routine safety procedures, replied one of the president's advisors, a small furry being whose voice squeaked with terror. Nothing unusual. Jake found this explanation unconvincing but decided not to press the issue. Diplomatic protocol required him to follow his host's lead, even when that host appeared to be having some kind of nervous breakdown. As they entered the presidential chambers, Jake noticed that all non-essential staff had been dismissed. Only the most senior council members remained, and they all watched him with expressions ranging from fear to fascination. It reminded Jake of the way people might watch a dangerous animal at a zoo. Representative Morrison, President Vexistar began once they were seated. Before we discuss trade matters, I feel it's important that you understand the current galactic situation. I'd appreciate that, Jake replied. Everyone does seem unusually tense today. The president activated a holographic display showing a galaxy-wide map dotted with red zones. Two major powers, the Zephyrian Empire and the Altarian Federation, have been engaged in armed conflict for several weeks now. Jake studied the display with interest. The red zones covered a significant portion of the galaxy, indicating a substantial war. That's very unfortunate, he said with genuine sympathy. How many casualties? Billions at risk, President Vextar replied grimly. The fighting spreads daily. Both sides refuse to negotiate. Jake leaned forward with the professional interest of a trained diplomat. Is there anything Earth can do to help? We've had some success with conflict mediation over the years. Our negotiation techniques have proven effective in resolving disputes. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. President Vextar went completely rigid. Ambassador Krillax, who had been taking notes, dropped his stylus with a loud clatter. The small furry advisor actually fell off his chair. Several other council members made choking sounds. That's very generous, President Vextar managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. But we have the situation completely under control. No outside intervention necessary, none at all. Jake was puzzled by the extreme reaction to his offer. Are you sure? Earth has quite a bit of experience with peace negotiations. We've developed some innovative approaches to ending conflicts. The word innovative seemed to have a particularly strong effect on the aliens. Several actually moved their chairs away from Jake, President Vextar's hands were visibly shaking. "I'm curious," Jake continued, unaware of the terror he was causing. "What methods are you currently using for mediation? Traditional diplomatic channels? Economic incentives? Perhaps some form of neutral arbitration?" Ambassador Krillax made a small, whimpering sound. "Representative Morrison, might I ask what methods Earth typically employs for conflict resolution?" Jake smiled, happy to discuss his favorite subject. "Well, we've learned that the key is addressing root causes rather than just symptoms. We like to create solutions that prevent conflicts from recurring. Permanent peace is always the goal." "Permanent?" squeaked the furry advisor. "Absolutely," Jake nodded enthusiastically. "There's no point in stopping a war if it's just going to start again in a few years. We prefer comprehensive solutions that eliminate the underlying problems entirely." The aliens exchanged looks of pure horror. President Vextar seemed to be having trouble breathing. "Could you give us an example?" she asked weakly. Jake thought for a moment. "Well, there was the situation in the Balkans region of Earth. Centuries of ethnic conflict, very complex historical grievances. Traditional diplomacy kept failing because the root causes remained unaddressed." "What did your people do?" Ambassador Krillax asked, though he looked like he didn't really want to know. "We restructured the entire region," Jake explained matter-of-factly. "New borders, population relocations, shared economic systems, integrated education programs. It took about 15 years, but now the area is completely peaceful. The old ethnic divisions just don't exist anymore." "You eliminated ethnic divisions?" President Vextar asked in a strangled voice. "Through peaceful integration and economic cooperation," Jake clarified. "People stopped fighting when they realized they had more in common than they thought. Shared prosperity tends to solve a lot of problems." The aliens looked somewhat relieved, though still nervous. "Of course," Jake added thoughtfully, "some situations require more creative approaches, but that's what makes peace-building interesting. Every conflict is a unique puzzle requiring a tailored solution." As Jake spoke about Earth's diplomatic successes, he remained completely unaware that his hosts viewed him as the most dangerous being in the galaxy. To them, his cheerful discussion of comprehensive solutions and creative approaches sounded like barely veiled threats of technological annihilation. Outside the presidential chambers, emergency protocols were quietly being activated across the station. Fleet commands throughout the galaxy were receiving urgent messages. "Human detected at Council Station. Maintain maximum distance from Sol system. Prepare for possible intervention scenarios." Jake Morrison, meanwhile, was looking forward to a productive trade meeting, completely oblivious to the galactic crisis his presence had triggered. President Vextar's private meeting room had been cleared of all but the most essential staff. Jake Morrison sat comfortably in a chair designed for human physiology, completely unaware that his hosts viewed him as the most dangerous being in known space. "Representative Morrison," President Vextar began very carefully, "I think it would help if you understood exactly why this current war concerns us so much." Jake nodded politely. "Of course. I'd like to help if possible." The words, "help if possible," caused visible tremors among the alien diplomats. Ambassador Krillax gripped his chair so tightly his claws left marks in the metal. "Perhaps," suggested Diplomat Renth, a small furry being with large worried eyes, "we should explain how the galaxy remembers Earth's previous assistance with conflicts." Jake looked puzzled. "I'm not sure what you mean. Earth doesn't get involved. In galactic politics very often." Renth activated a holographic display showing peaceful farming communities on dozens of worlds. People worked fields with simple hand tools and lived in small wooden buildings. "This is the Drakmor region," Renth explained quietly. 15 years ago, it was the site of the most devastating war in recent galactic history. Jake studied the peaceful scenes with interest. "It looks very tranquil now. What changed?" The aliens exchanged nervous glances. President Vexitar took a deep breath before continuing. Two major civilizations fought for 3 years. The Drakmor Empire and the Stellaris Federation had weapons capable of destroying planets. Billions died. Both sides kept building bigger and more terrible weapons. That sounds horrible, Jake said with genuine concern. How did it end? A single Earth vessel offered to mediate, Renth replied. The ESV Hampton, commanded by Captain Bill Walker, 28 human crew members. Jake smiled with recognition. I remember reading about that mission. One of our diplomatic success stories. The aliens looked like they were attending a funeral. The Hampton's solution, Renth continued, his voice getting smaller, was to disable all military assets on both sides simultaneously. Smart approach, Jake nodded approvingly. Remove the ability to fight while forcing negotiation. Very efficient. Your people accomplished this, President Vextar said slowly, by introducing what Captain Walker called adaptive electromagnetic parasites into every technological system in both empires. Jake's expression remained interested and positive. Sounds like a elegant, non-lethal solution. Much better than direct military intervention. The parasites, Renth's voice was barely audible now, were microscopic machines that could multiply, evolve, and spread through any electronic system. They didn't just disable military hardware. Oh, Jake leaned forward with professional interest. They disabled everything, Ambassador Krillax whispered. Power generation, life support systems, communication networks, transportation, medical, equipment, food distribution, manufacturing, education systems, entertainment, banking, trade networks. Jake's smile faded slightly as he began to understand the scope of what had happened. Both civilizations were reduced to pre-industrial technology levels in approximately 6 hours. President Vextar continued. Your Captain Walker then informed both sides that the parasites would remain active until they signed a permanent peace treaty. Well, Jake said thoughtfully, that certainly would force them to negotiate. They signed the treaty immediately, Renth added. They had no choice. Without technology, they couldn't fight. They couldn't even communicate between different planets. Jake sat back in his chair, processing this information. That does sound more disruptive than the official reports suggested. The parasites are still there, Ambassador Krillax said quietly. Still evolving. Still destroying any attempt to rebuild advanced technology. Both civilizations remain permanently stuck in an agricultural age. Captain Walker seemed genuinely confused when council representatives suggested his methods might be considered extreme, President Vextar added. He asked if we would have preferred them to just destroy both civilizations completely instead. Jake winced slightly. I can see how that might have seemed like a harsh solution to your perspective. The humans called it pest control, Renth said, like removing insects from a garden. The room fell silent as Jake began to understand why. His arrival at the station had caused such widespread panic. So when I offered to help with the current war, he said slowly, you assumed I was suggesting another intervention. The entire galaxy has been trying to keep this conflict secret from Earth, President Vextar confirmed. No one wants to discover what creative solution your people might devise for this particular war. Jake looked around the room at the terrified faces of some of the galaxy's most powerful beings. You're all afraid of us. Terrified, Ambassador Krillax admitted. Your species approaches warfare like an engineering problem. You don't fight to win territory or resources. You fight to permanently eliminate the possibility of future conflict. And you're very good at permanent solutions, Renth added weakly. Jake considered this carefully. I suppose our methods might seem extreme to species that prefer traditional military approaches. Traditional military approaches, President Vextar said, involve armies fighting armies, conquering territory, negotiating surrender terms. Your people eliminate entire technological civilizations and call it a peaceful resolution. Because very few people actually died, Jake pointed out, Captain Walker's solution prevented billions of additional casualties. By ending both civilizations as functioning technological societies, Ambassador Krillax replied. They're farmers now, permanent farmers. They can never be anything else because the parasites destroy any technology more advanced than basic metalworking. Jake was beginning to see the problem from the alien perspective. You view this as cultural destruction. We view it as the most thorough conquest in galactic history, President Vextar said. Achieved without firing a single shot or losing a single human life. Your people solved a 3-year war in 6 hours and considered it a minor diplomatic exercise. Captain Walker seemed proud of how efficiently they'd handled the situation. Renth added. He submitted a report describing the mission as a routine peacekeeping operation. Jake sat quietly for several minutes, thinking about the implications. Finally, he looked up at the assembled aliens. You believe that if Earth gets involved in the current war, we'll do something similar to the Zephyrians and Altarians? We don't know what you'll do, President Vextar replied. That's what makes it so terrifying. Humans approach each conflict as a unique problem requiring a creative solution. Your solutions tend to be permanent, irreversible, and impossible to predict. What if we just offered normal diplomatic mediation? Jake asked. Traditional peace. Talks? Ambassador Krillax laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Representative Morrison, when was the last time your species accepted a temporary solution to any problem? Jake thought about this. We do prefer comprehensive approaches. You prefer solutions that prevent the same problem from ever occurring. Again, President Vextar corrected, your people view recurring conflicts as evidence of incomplete problem-solving. That's not entirely wrong, Jake admitted. What's the point of stopping a war if it's just going to start again? The aliens shuddered collectively at this statement. So you understand, Renth said, why we've been trying to keep this war secret. From Earth, we're not just afraid of human intervention, we're afraid of human problem-solving. Jake looked around the room again, seeing the fear in every alien face. For the first time in his diplomatic career, he was beginning to understand why human trade delegations were always so enthusiastically welcomed and why their departure was met with such obvious relief. I won't mention the war to anyone on Earth, he said quietly. I can see how our involvement might complicate the situation. The relief in the room was immediate and overwhelming. Several aliens actually slumped in their chairs. Thank you, President Vextar said with genuine gratitude. The galaxy appreciates Earth's understanding in this matter. As the meeting continued, with routine trade discussions, Jake found himself wondering what other galactic problems had been carefully hidden from Earth's attention. Judging by the aliens' reactions, humanity's reputation for creative problem-solving was both more extensive and more feared than he had ever imagined. 3 days had passed since Jake Morrison's diplomatic visit to the council station. The human representative had agreed to keep the galactic war secret from Earth, understanding that his people's involvement might complicate the peace process. Both warring factions had been quietly informed about the human presence at the station, which immediately prompted serious ceasefire negotiations. President Vextar was reviewing the latest peace proposals in her office when her emergency communication system activated with the highest priority alert. The piercing alarm made her scales turn pale with instant dread. President, came the panicked voice of Fleet Coordinator Genthal from the main control center. We have a critical situation developing. A Zephyrian battle group has been forced out of hyperspace. Vextar's blood turned to ice water. Where are they? Sol system, ma'am. Approximately 12 million kilometers from the third planet. There be navigation systems malfunctioned during a retreat from Altarian forces. The president's hand shook as she activated every emergency protocol available to her position. This was the nightmare scenario that every galactic leader had feared since the war began. How many ships? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. 47. vessels, including 3 heavy cruisers and a command dreadnought. They're attempting emergency repairs, but their distress beacon is broadcasting on all frequencies. Vextar closed her eyes and tried to think. Maybe the humans wouldn't notice. Maybe their primitive detection systems would miss the alien fleet. Maybe they would ignore it as space debris. "Have they been detected by Earth?" she asked, knowing the answer before Genthal replied. "Yes, ma'am." Earth monitoring stations began tracking them immediately upon arrival. "We're intercepting massive increases in human communication traffic. Their military installations are activating across the planet." On Earth, Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the Pentagon's Extraterrestrial Response Center, watching tactical displays that showed the alien fleet's exact position and configuration. Around her, the most advanced military minds on the planet worked, with calm efficiency that would have terrified any alien observer. "Analysis, Colonel Carter?" Admiral Hayes asked the brown-haired intelligence officer reviewing the alien vessel profiles. 47 ships, advanced technology, heavily armed. Colonel Pete Carter reported without emotion. Energy signatures suggest military rather than scientific vessels. Configuration indicates a battle fleet in distress. Threat assessment? Unknown intentions, but their weapons systems remain active. Ship designs don't match any known Earth. Technology. Recommend immediate response protocols. Admiral Hayes nodded calmly. "Initiate Operation Welcome Wagon. I want our greeting prepared for immediate deployment." "Yes, ma'am. Estimated preparation time? 14 minutes. Meanwhile, aboard the Zephyrian command ship, Fleet Commander Vracath watched his repair teams work frantically on the damaged hyperdrive systems. The massive reptilian warrior had fought in dozens of campaigns across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this terrifying situation. "Commander," his sensor operator reported with obvious fear, "we're detecting massive energy buildups on the planet's surface. Multiple locations across all continents." "What kind of energy?" Vracath demanded. "Unknown configuration, sir. The power levels are beyond our sensors' ability to measure accurately. Whatever they're charging up, it's far more advanced than our intelligence reports suggested." Vracath had heard the stories about human technological capabilities. Every military officer in the galaxy knew the tales of Drakmor. He had hoped they were exaggerated. "Sir," his communication officer announced, with a trembling voice, "we're receiving an incoming transmission from the planet. Put it on the main screen." Admiral Hayes appeared on the viewer, her expression friendly but alert. Behind her, Vracath could see dozens of humans working at control stations displaying tactical information that made his scales crawl with fear. "Unknown. Vessels," Admiral Hayes said in a pleasant conversational tone. "This is Admiral Lisa Hayes of Earth Defense Command. Welcome to our solar system. We're detecting some technical difficulties with your ships. Can we offer assistance?" Vracath had been briefed about human politeness. Military intelligence warned that it was far more dangerous than their threats. "This is Fleet Commander Vracath of the Zephyrian Empire," he replied as carefully as possible. "We experienced a navigation malfunction and require time for repairs. We mean no harm to your world or system." "That's wonderful to hear." Admiral Hayes smiled warmly. "We're always happy to help stranded travelers. I'm sure you understand that. We'll need to implement some basic safety protocols while you're visiting our neighborhood." "What kind of protocols?" Vracath asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know. Admiral Hayes consulted a tablet with the same casual attitude she might use for reading a grocery list. "Nothing too complicated. We'll need to temporarily disable your weapon systems, download your navigation and communication logs, install monitoring equipment on your vessels, and assign each ship a human liaison officer." Vracath felt his heart stop beating. "You're demanding our surrender?" "Oh no," Admiral Hayes replied with genuine confusion. "We're offering technical assistance. The alternative would be considerably less convenient for everyone involved." On the tactical display behind Admiral Hayes, Vracath could see thousands of launch signatures spreading across Earth's surface. Whatever the humans were deploying, there were far too many objects for his fleet to track or intercept. "Commander," his tactical officer whispered urgently, "sensors detect incoming objects. Multiple launch points. Estimated arrival time, 11 minutes. "Missiles?" Vrax asked hopefully. "Unknown, sir. They're not following ballistic trajectories. They appear to be intelligent and capable of independent maneuvering." Admiral Hayes maintained her friendly smile. "Commander Vrax, I should mention that our response protocols are fully automated. If you could signal your acceptance of our assistance within the next 8 minutes, it would save considerable paperwork for both our governments." Vrax looked around his bridge at officers who had faced death in countless battles but were now paralyzed with terror. Through the main viewer, the blue-green planet looked so peaceful and harmless. "Admiral Hayes," he said with as much dignity as he could manage, "the Zephyrian fleet accepts your generous offer of assistance." "Excellent," Admiral Hayes beamed with genuine pleasure. "Welcome to Earth, Commander. I think you'll find this experience quite educational." As human boarding craft approached the Zephyrian vessels, Vrax received an urgent communication from his home government. The message was brief. "Agree to all human demands. Sign any documents they present. Do not anger them." 30 minutes. Later, President Vextar received a transmission that confirmed her worst fears. Admiral Hayes appeared on her screen with the same friendly smile that had terrified Fleet Commander Vrax. "President Vextar," Admiral Hayes said warmly, "I understand there's been some confusion about a regional conflict in your area. The Zephyrian representatives are helping us understand the situation. We're looking forward to hosting peace negotiations here on Earth." Vextar's worst nightmare was confirmed. Earth wasn't just aware of the war now, they were taking control of it. "Admiral," Vextar said weakly, "that's very generous, but perhaps the Council could handle the mediation process." "Oh, we wouldn't want to impose," Admiral Hayes replied cheerfully. "Besides, we're already seeing excellent progress. The Altarian Federation has requested permission to send a diplomatic mission to Earth. Apparently, they're very eager to participate in our peace process." As the transmission ended, President Vextar slumped in her chair. Within hours, both warring factions would be on Earth, subject to whatever creative peacemaking methods the humans decided to employ. Across the galaxy, military commanders began implementing emergency protocols. Fleet movements were suspended. Weapons research programs were quietly shut down. Intelligence services started preparing detailed reports on every conflict, dispute, or disagreement that might potentially attract human attention. The galaxy's greatest fear had been realized. The humans were helping again. In his quarters aboard a transport ship heading back to Earth, Jake Morrison finished his routine trade reports. He remained completely unaware that his innocent mention of Earth's willingness to assist with regional stability had triggered the largest diplomatic crisis in galactic history. He was already looking forward to his next trade mission, completely ignorant of the fact that every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy was now desperately working to ensure they would never, ever need Earth's help with anything again. The age of human intervention had begun, and the universe would never be the same.